What would you do if your peaceful garden suddenly became a battleground against corrupt power? John Carter, a retired lawyer, never imagined his vegetable patch would ignite a war with the ruthless HOA president, Karen Parker. When bulldozers block his driveway and threats escalate to arson, John uncovers a web of embezzlement and criminal schemes that could destroy his entire community. Can one man stand against greed and intimidation? Stay tuned to witness an epic fight for justice and unity. John Carter had always dreamed of a simple life after years of grinding away as a high-powered attorney. 15 years of 80-hour work weeks had left him longing for something more grounded, something tangible. So when he finally took early retirement, he poured his soul into his modest home on the edge of Willow Creek Estates and devoted his time to his passion, gardening. It wasn't much, just a few raised beds along his driveway where tomatoes, peppers, and herbs flourished. But to John, it was paradise. That morning, the sun was just creeping over the rooftops as John knelt in the dirt, humming a soft tune while planting another row of heirloom tomatoes. The smell of earth and the hint of dew on his hands felt like freedom itself. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and smiled at the neat, orderly rows he'd spent months cultivating. Suddenly, a sharp, nasal voice cut through the morning calm. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" John glanced up, startled, to see Karen Parker, the HOA president, strutting up his driveway like she owned the place. She was impeccably dressed in a fitted blazer and designer jeans, looking out of place against the rustic backdrop of John's little farm. Her meticulously styled blonde hair didn't move, even as the wind tried its best to unsettle it. "Morning, Karen," John greeted, wiping his hands on his apron. "Just putting in a few more tomatoes." Karen's face twisted with disdain as she surveyed the garden. "This is completely unacceptable," she snapped. "Front yards are to be landscaped with grass and approved shrubs only. Vegetable gardens belong in backyards. You know this." John couldn't help but chuckle softly, though he quickly suppressed it when Karen's eyes flared with irritation. "My property deed predates the HOA by 30 years, Karen. I've got grandfathered exemptions on most of the rules." Karen's expression hardened, and she whipped out her phone, snapping pictures furiously. "You'll be receiving a formal violation notice by tomorrow. Consider this your final warning." John straightened, folding his arms as he looked down at her. "You might want to double-check your legal footing there. I've reviewed every HOA agreement since moving in, and I'm well within my rights. You're wasting your time." Karen scoffed, dismissing him with a wave of her hand. "We'll see about that. You're not special, John. Rules are rules." She marched off, heels clicking against the driveway, leaving John shaking his head in disbelief. As she disappeared around the corner, Mr. Jenkins from across the street wandered over with his golden retriever in tow, giving John a sympathetic nod. "She tried to fine me for repainting my mailbox," he muttered. "Said Hunter Green wasn't the same as Forest Green. Some nonsense about uniformity." John laughed despite himself. "I swear she's going to run this neighborhood into the ground with her petty nonsense." That evening, as the sky blazed in hues of amber and rose, John found a bright orange violation notice plastered to his front door. The paper was crisp, official, and filled with legal jargon. A fine of $300 a day, starting immediately. John crumpled the paper in his fist, trying to keep his temper in check. A spark of stubborn resolve ignited within him. He wouldn't be bullied out of his own property. It was time to dig deeper. The next morning, John sat at his old desk, laptop open, sifting through his family's records. His father had always been meticulous about paperwork, especially when it came to the land. Buried under a pile of dusty folders, he found what he was looking for. A faded map from 1973 and a thick document titled Property Exemptions and Rights. Just as he started reading, his phone buzzed. It was Martha Collins, the elderly widow who lived 3 doors down. "John, dear," she whispered, voice trembling. "Karen's been targeting anyone who disagrees with her. The Thompsons just paid a $500 fine because their daughter's wheelchair ramp didn't match the approved color scheme." John gritted his teeth, rage bubbling inside. "That can't be legal," he replied. "They didn't fight it," Martha sighed. "Too tired and too broke to deal with Karen's legal threats. You're the only one willing to stand up to her." John glanced at the faded map, his eyes narrowing with determination. Thanks, Martha. I'll take care of this. Just as he hung up, a rumble outside made his heart skip a beat. He looked out the window and froze. 3 massive bulldozers were parked across his driveway, blocking his car. Karen stood beside them with a smug grin, accompanied by a tall, suited man with a leather briefcase. John stormed outside, clutching his papers. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted. Karen looked up, feigning surprise. "Oh, didn't you get the notice? Immediate removal of unauthorized structures. Your garden is going down." John tightened his grip on the documents. "You're making a big mistake, Karen. You can't just bulldoze my property." The suited man stepped forward, flashing a business card. "Paul Baker, HOA Legal Counsel." "We're well within our rights, Mr. Carter. These structures constitute a public nuisance and must be removed." John smirked, refusing to back down. "You're not just messing with my garden. You're messing with the law. My deed predates the HOA, and I have documented exemptions. You bulldoze my garden, and you're looking at a hefty lawsuit." Karen's expression faltered, but she quickly regained her composure. "You're bluffing. You can't stop this." John raised his phone. "Actually, I'm recording this whole conversation, and I just texted my attorney to get down here." Just then, the low rumble of a sheriff's cruiser broke the tension. Officer Brooks stepped out, eyes assessing the scene. "What's going on here?" John pointed at the bulldozers. "Trespassing and attempted destruction of property. I've got the documents to prove my ownership rights." Karen tried to intervene. "Officer, this is HOA business. You have no jurisdiction." Brooks raised an eyebrow. "Actually, I do when it involves property rights and trespassing. Let's see those documents, John." John handed over the faded papers, and Brooks skimmed through them, his face growing stern. He glanced at Karen and Paul. "You folks might want to reconsider your actions. This property is clearly exempt from HOA rules." Karen spluttered, her composure finally cracking. "This can't be right. We enforce rules here." Brooks folded his arms. "Rules don't override property law. You're on thin ice here. I suggest you move these bulldozers before I start writing up charges." John held his ground, chin raised. Karen's confidence had visibly wilted, but as she retreated with Paul in tow, she threw one last glare over her shoulder. "This isn't over," she snarled. John couldn't help but laugh, watching as the bulldozers backed out, leaving his garden intact. But in his gut, he knew this was just the beginning. Karen Parker didn't take defeat lightly, and whatever she was planning next was bound to be worse. As he gathered his papers and retreated inside, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Get ready to lose everything." John's jaw tightened, and he looked out the window toward the darkening street, sensing the storm that was yet to come. That night, sleep didn't come easily. John lay in bed, replaying the day's events over and over in his mind. The smugness on Karen's face, the sneer from Paul, the sheer audacity of those bulldozers blocking his driveway. He couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't done with him yet. As the clock ticked past midnight, his phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "You think you've won, old man? You have no idea what's coming." John sat up straight, heart pounding, adrenaline surging. He knew better than to respond to threats. But this one felt personal. He couldn't tell if it was Karen, Paul, or someone else entirely, but it was clear they weren't giving up. He decided to document the message, just in case. The next morning, as he sipped his coffee on the porch, Martha appeared, shuffling up the driveway with an old leather folder tucked under her arm. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and there was a fire in her eyes that John hadn't seen before. "Morning, Martha. What brings you by?" John asked, motioning her to sit. She settled down with a heavy sigh. "John, I've been digging through my old papers. Found something you might want to see." She opened the folder, revealing faded documents from decades ago. "My late husband used to handle some of the development accounts when they built Willow Creek Estates," she said. "And I remember him mentioning something odd about the way the HOA was formed. See here, this is the original land deed from the 1970s, before the HOA was established. Your family wasn't the only one with exemptions. There are 11 other properties with similar rights, including mine." John's eyes widened as he scanned the documents. This could blow their whole case out of the water, he muttered. If there are more properties exempt from HOA rules, Martha nodded grimly. Karen's been running roughshod over the whole community, ignoring those exemptions. People have been paying fines for years without knowing they didn't have to. I bet that money didn't just disappear. John's mind raced. We need to find out where it went. If Karen and Paul have been embezzling funds? Suddenly, a loud banging at the front door startled both of them. John rushed to open it, and there stood Mr. Jenkins, panting and holding his phone. You gotta see this, he wheezed, thrusting the phone into John's hands. On the screen was a shaky video from Mrs. Jenkins, recorded earlier that morning. It showed Karen and Paul standing outside Martha's house, pointing at her mailbox and the decorative flowers around her porch. Paul was gesturing animatedly, while Karen barked orders to two men in construction vests. They're planning to bulldoze your garden and hers, Jenkins said, voice shaky, and they're saying it's because of landscape violations and safety hazards. John felt fury boiling in his veins. They're targeting Martha now? This has gone too far. More than that, Jenkins added. I overheard them saying something about fixing this once and for all. Like they're planning something big. I've got a bad feeling, John. John gritted his teeth. He wasn't about to let these power-hungry maniacs bulldoze through the lives of decent people. We need to rally the neighborhood, he declared. If they're planning something drastic, we'll need everyone on board. By noon, John had spread the word, and neighbors started gathering at his house. People whispered among themselves, a mix of fear and anger on their faces. Some had already received new violation notices, demanding payment for absurd infractions like mismatched flowers or unauthorized bird feeders. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoed down the street. Everyone turned to see Mrs. Thompson, the woman whose daughter used a wheelchair ramp, pointing at her yard. Someone had spray-painted "Rule Breaker" across her front steps in red letters. John hurried over, helping calm her down as she sobbed, clutching her daughter protectively. They're terrorizing people now, Martha whispered, wiping away tears. How can they get away with this? John clenched his fists. They think fear will keep us quiet. They're wrong. Just then, Officer Brooks arrived, parking his cruiser at the curb. He stepped out, looking weary but determined. I've been getting calls from half the neighborhood, he said, and I've just been to the county office. You're going to want to see this. He handed John a set of documents. They were financial reports from the HOA accounts, records Martha had requested months ago but never received. John quickly scanned the papers, eyes widening. There's over $300,000 missing, he muttered, barely able to comprehend it, and it's all been funneled into a company called Williams Taylor Consulting. Brooks nodded. It's registered to Karen and Paul. Looks like they've been siphoning funds for years. Community improvement projects that never happened, road repairs that never got done. John's mind spun with the implications. We need a community meeting, and fast. This has to come out in the open. Brooks looked grim. I'll secure the clubhouse. Make sure everyone gets invited, including Karen and Paul. Let's see how they handle being confronted with the truth. As Brooks made calls and more neighbors gathered, John could feel the energy shifting. People were done being pushed around. They were ready to fight back. Martha pulled him aside, her voice low and serious. They won't go down easy, she warned. Karen's too proud, and Paul's too slick. They'll try to turn this around and make it seem like we're the problem. John nodded. Then we'll hit them with facts and make sure the whole community sees. They've been hiding behind rules and regulations for too long. It's time to turn the tables. As the sun dipped below the horizon, John watched as lights flickered on in house after house. Neighbors were preparing for the meeting, arming themselves with stories of intimidation and fines. Despite the tension, a new sense of unity had taken hold. They were no longer afraid, and that gave John hope. But as he walked back to his porch, his phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. You think you're so clever. Tomorrow your precious garden won't be the only thing ruined. Watch your back. John inhaled slowly, refusing to let fear take root. Tomorrow would be a battle, but he was ready. Let them come. He'd fought harder battles in courtrooms against more dangerous foes. This time, though, he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for his home and the people who called this place theirs. With a grim smile, he looked at the broken garden, vowing to restore it better than ever once this nightmare was over. He wasn't going to let some petty tyrant and a crooked lawyer destroy the life he'd built. Tomorrow would decide everything. The day of the community meeting arrived, and tension hung thick in the air. As John made his way to the clubhouse, he could feel the unease radiating from his neighbors. Some gave him tight nods of support, while others looked anxious, unsure of how things would unfold. Word had spread quickly about the missing funds, and people were angry, but there was also fear. Fear of retaliation from Karen and Paul. The clubhouse was packed by the time John arrived. Officer Brooks stood near the entrance, greeting residents and keeping a watchful eye. Inside, the buzz of murmurs filled the room as people whispered about the scandal. Just as John was about to take the podium, the door burst open and Karen Parker strutted in, followed by Paul Baker and three burly men dressed in private security uniforms. John's gut twisted. Clearly, Karen wasn't planning to go down without a fight. She marched straight up to the front, grabbing the microphone before John could react. "Attention, everyone!" Karen's voice rang out, unnaturally chipper and falsely sweet. "I just wanted to thank you all for coming tonight. There's been a lot of misinformation going around, and I'm here to clear things up." John crossed his arms, staying calm. He could see Martha sitting near the front, clutching her old leather folder. Behind her, Mr. Jenkins was recording everything on his phone, ready to live stream whatever went down. Karen plastered on a smile. "It has come to my attention that some individuals have been spreading baseless accusations against me and the HOA. I want to assure you that every action we take is strictly within the community's best interests. Claims of missing funds and unauthorized spending are completely false and unfounded." Paul stepped forward, flashing his lawyerly grin. "As HOA legal counsel, I can personally attest that all financial records are in perfect order. We're prepared to provide documentation to anyone with concerns, but spreading lies and conspiracy theories will not be tolerated. We will pursue defamation lawsuits against anyone perpetuating these falsehoods." The threat landed heavily, and John could sense some neighbors hesitating, glancing nervously at one another. But he wasn't about to let Karen and Paul scare them into submission again. He stepped forward, motioning to Officer Brooks to start the projector. The screen lit up behind him, showing scanned documents and bank statements Martha had uncovered. "Let's talk about the facts," John said, his voice steady. "These records clearly show that over $300,000 have been funneled into a private company owned by Karen Parker and Paul Baker, Williams Taylor Consulting. This money was supposed to be used for community improvements, but not one project was completed. You've all been paying for renovations and road repairs that never happened." Karen's face hardened, but she kept her smile in place. "That's absolutely ridiculous," she shot back. "Those documents are fake. Someone's trying to discredit me." But Officer Brooks stepped up, holding an official-looking folder. "Actually, Mrs. Parker, these documents came directly from the county clerk's office. They are certified public records. We've already submitted them to the district attorney's office for investigation." The room erupted in whispers, and Karen's composure finally cracked, her face flushed with anger. Paul tried to pull her aside, but she ripped her arm away, marching toward John with eyes blazing. "You think you're so clever," she hissed, "but you're just a washed-up old man clinging to a vegetable patch. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Paul tugged at her arm, whispering something frantic, but Karen ignored him. "This whole neighborhood belongs to me. I made it what it is. You think these people care about your tomatoes and your stupid exemptions? They don't care. They follow me because they know I get things done." Martha rose from her seat, her voice calm but resolute. "No, Karen. We followed you because you threatened us. You used fear and intimidation to control us. But not anymore." Just then, a loud crash sounded from outside. People turned in alarm as one of the private security guards ran in, looking shaken. "Ma'am, someone spray-painted your car. It says thief in big red letters." Karen's face went white, and she rushed outside, Paul trailing behind her. John took the opportunity to address the crowd. "This is our chance to take back our community," he said. "Karen and Paul have ruled through fear, but they don't own us. We decide what happens here, and it's time we stand up and say, enough is enough." People began nodding, rallying around his words. Mrs. Thompson, the one fined for her daughter's wheelchair ramp, stood up and shouted, "I vote to dissolve the HOA board and hold new elections." Others echoed her sentiment, and hands went up one after another. Karen re-entered the room, her face streaked with tears and makeup, just in time to see the unanimous vote to remove her and Paul from power. Officer Brooks stepped up and addressed the crowd. Based on the evidence provided, both Karen Parker and Paul Baker are now under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. Until further notice, they are suspended from all HOA duties and are to remain off community property. Karen tried to lunge at John, but Paul grabbed her, muttering furiously. "You just ruined us," he hissed at her. "Do you know what they're going to find once they dig deeper?" Karen's eyes widened in panic and she shrieked, "No! They can't do this to me! I built this neighborhood! It's mine!" As Officer Brooks moved to escort them out, Karen broke free and screamed at the crowd, "You're all worthless! Without me, this place will fall apart! You're nothing without my leadership!" John just shook his head, feeling a mix of pity and relief. The neighbors stood strong, determined not to be bullied anymore. As Karen and Paul were let out in handcuffs, the crowd began to cheer, relief and unity finally settling over the room. But just as the tension seemed to break, a phone chimed in John's pocket. He pulled it out to find a new message from the same unknown number. "Enjoy your victory. You think it's over? It's just begun. You don't know who you're messing with." John's stomach twisted. He looked around at his friends and neighbors, wondering who else might still be loyal to Karen, or if there was someone higher up the chain pulling the strings. Martha, seeing his troubled expression, gave him a reassuring smile. "Don't let them scare you," she said softly. "We're stronger together. Whatever comes next, we'll face it as a community." John nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the storm wasn't quite over yet. He knew he had rattled a hornet's nest, and whatever came next might be even more dangerous. But as he looked around the clubhouse filled with resilient faces, he knew one thing for certain. They were done living in fear. The fight wasn't over, but they had taken the first step, and that was enough for now. In the days that followed the explosive community meeting, the neighborhood seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. With Karen and Paul facing charges and the HOA board effectively dissolved, people started to reclaim their sense of normalcy. A temporary neighborhood council was formed with Martha Collins elected as chairwoman. Their first order of business was to audit all HOA finances and begin simplifying the outdated and overbearing community rules. But just as things seemed to be settling, strange incidents began to unfold. Someone dumped a pile of garbage in John's driveway, and another night, his garden beds were trampled. Graffiti appeared on his fence, reading "Traitor" in bold red letters. Martha reported that her mailbox had been smashed in, and Mrs. Thompson's wheelchair ramp was found covered in motor oil, making it dangerously slick. The tension that had finally begun to ease crept back in, darker and more sinister than before. John knew it wasn't a coincidence. Someone, or maybe several people, were retaliating. Officer Brooks increased patrols around the area, but catching someone in the act proved elusive. Whoever was responsible was slippery, almost professional. One evening, as John was replanting his trampled tomatoes, Martha hurried over, clutching a letter with a concerned look on her face. "John, you need to see this," she panted, handing him the envelope. The letter was typed, no signature, but the message was chilling. "You think you've won. The HOA was just the beginning. Bigger things are coming, and you'll regret crossing us. This neighborhood isn't yours. It's ours." John's stomach churned as he read it again, feeling a familiar, gnawing anxiety. "Who could this be?" he murmured. "Karen and Paul are both under investigation. Could they be orchestrating this from the outside?" Martha shook her head. "I did some digging through old records. Paul wasn't just the HOA lawyer. He's connected to a network of real estate developers, the kind that buys up foreclosed properties and flips them for profit. I think this was never just about power. It was about money. They wanted to push people out, devalue properties, and scoop them up dirt cheap." John clenched his jaw. "And I just threw a wrench in their whole operation." Martha nodded gravely. "They're angry because you ruined their scheme. But I don't think they were working alone. Karen's power was too entrenched. Someone else must have been backing her. That night, as John lay in bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that Martha was right. He decided to take a different approach. He called an old friend from his law firm, a private investigator named Mike Riggins, and asked him to do some digging on both Karen and Paul, as well as any real estate ventures linked to them. A week later, Mike called back. "John, you were right. Karen and Paul are connected to a real estate investment group called Clear Ridge Holdings. It's a shell company, but the real owner is a guy named Victor Steele. Major player in the real estate game, notorious for using underhanded tactics to acquire properties. Karen and Paul were just his puppets. They were setting up HOA rules to force people out so Steele could buy up the properties." John took a deep breath, processing the information. So it wasn't just about being a petty tyrant. She was lining Steele's pockets. "Exactly," Mike confirmed. "And now that you've blown up their operation, Steele's not happy. He's got a reputation for making people pay." That evening, as the neighborhood council met in the clubhouse, John shared the revelation. Murmurs of anger and fear swept through the room. Just then, Officer Brooks entered, looking grim. "We just got a tip," he announced. "There's been an attempted arson at John's house. Neighbors spotted someone pouring gasoline on the porch, but managed to scare them off before they lit the match. Security footage caught a glimpse. It was one of Steele's known associates. We're moving fast on this. I'm putting extra patrols on your street, John." John felt his hands tremble with a mix of rage and fear. The stakes had escalated far beyond neighborhood squabbles. This was organized crime, and he had just painted a target on his back. 2 nights later, Steele himself showed up at John's doorstep, his goons flanking him on either side. The man was tall, impeccably dressed, with a cool, confident smirk on his face. John didn't flinch as Steele leaned against the doorframe. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Carter," Steele said casually. "Why don't you just move on? I'll buy your house for twice its value. You take the money, walk away, and let me clean up this mess." John straightened, matching Steele's unyielding stare. "You're not buying out this community. We're not for sale." Steele's smile faded, and his voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "You really think you can fight me? People a lot stronger than you have tried, and they didn't end up well." Before John could respond, headlights flooded the driveway. A convoy of police vehicles pulled in, and Officer Brooks stepped out with a team of detectives. Steele's expression tightened as Brooks approached. "Mr. Steele," Brooks announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson, intimidation, and organized criminal activity. We've got more than enough evidence to put you away." Steele shot John a glare, one filled with venomous hate, before being cuffed and led to a squad car. The goons were also taken into custody, protesting their innocence all the way. As the cars drove off, neighbors began emerging from their homes, watching the scene unfold. The relief was palpable, and Martha stepped forward, putting a gentle hand on John's shoulder. "It's over," she whispered. John looked at the charred remnants of his porch, the remnants of his once peaceful life, and gave a weary smile. "For now," he replied, knowing that the fight had been won, but that rebuilding trust and unity would take time. Weeks passed, and the neighborhood council restructured, focusing on transparency and community-driven initiatives. The properties Steele had tried to buy up were placed under protective orders, and his entire operation crumbled under legal scrutiny. John's garden slowly returned to life, with neighbors bringing new plants to replace what had been destroyed. Martha helped design a community garden in the vacant lot next door, where everyone could grow something of their own. It became a place not just for planting, but for healing. One evening, as the sun set and fireflies danced in the cool breeze, John sat on his newly rebuilt porch, savoring the smell of fresh soil and tomato vines. Martha joined him, bringing over a fresh pitcher of iced tea. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it," John corrected, raising his glass. In the distance, the sounds of laughter echoed from the community garden. Despite everything they had endured, the neighborhood had come together stronger than before. John knew there would always be new challenges, but they had faced the worst and come out on top. And as he looked around, he knew one thing for certain. No matter what trouble came their way, this community would stand together, unbreakable.